My name is Jeremy Devens, and this is the Quiet Mind Astrology Podcast. And today I want to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that I see people making based on my 17 years of experience in practicing and studying and giving astrology readings. So I've been starting a new TikTok page over at tiktok.com/@quietmindastrology because there's a lot of people on TikTok sharing a lot of misinformation and misguided information on astrology. And I didn't think I would be moving over there. I resisted it, but I realized that there is a big audience here and they need to know the truth. They need to know how astrology really works and the power of it. And I don't see that happening a whole lot over there. So I started an account. You can follow me there. Maybe you're not super into TikTok yet, but I do see that it's a potential area of growth for a lot of businesses and people sharing their skills online. So I do see it becoming more of a common thing in the future. So I'm starting there already. You can check that out, the link in the show notes. And my most popular post so far already has been this topic of these common mistakes that people are making that they might not be aware of. So like 90% of adults at this point know their sun sign. So pretty much anyone you meet on the street, you could ask them, what's your sun sign? Almost everybody's going to know what that is. And of course, everybody also knows that there's not just 12 types of people in the world. And we know that that's a big oversimplification to say, I'm just an Aries or a Taurus or a Gemini. But it's easier, and astrology seems very complicated and dense and deep, and it is. So people kind of gravitate towards these simplifications and just follow these memes or these posts about like, oh, this person is such a Scorpio or such a Capricorn. And yes, that is a part of our expression. We do have those things within us. I am a Virgo rising and I'm very detail oriented and I like to organize things even as far back as when I was like 3 years old. One of my first memories is getting to stay at my friend's house who had all the toys that I wanted. And then instead of playing with the toys, I organized the entire room and cleaned everything up because I found joy in that. Not everybody does. And yes, that is, I could say I'm such a Virgo for wanting to do that and being that way even as a kid before I had any sort of idea of what Virgo was. And you might have certain personality traits and things that you really resonate with your signs. That's great. That's helpful. That can be really insightful and help you understand yourself. And it can become very limiting and put you into a box and sort of stereotype you and others and think that you're just this type of person. And of course, if that were true, then every little horoscope you read on an app would be true for every 641 million other people who also have that same sun sign as you. And of course, in Western approach, most people grow up in Western astrology kind of background like I did in the US. We just know our sun sign. So I didn't know about Virgo rising. In fact, I thought I was a Libra rising when I learned that. But I always thought just Aries sun. Even from an early childhood, it's like, oh, you're an Aries. And fortunately for me, I'm in that rare group of people who it's actually the same in both systems. So that made it a little easier to transition that part. But for most people, it's not the same. And the truth is really that we're all incredibly unique. And there's trillions of possible expressions of every placement in your chart, not just your sun sign. But when you bring into the signs, the houses, in the Nakshatras then, in Vedic astrology, and then all the divisional charts, there are trillions of possible calculations. And every person is completely unique to that moment in time. And there's never been and will never be another person like you. Unless we are actually in this cycle of constant reincarnation, as the Vedic teachings talk about, where everything that's happening now has already happened before, and it will happen again, and every possible variation of that as well. So I don't know. I can't prove that. I can't speak to that right now. I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm not an expert in these teachings, but that is a potential thing. And whether it is true or not, we have this illusion of this sense of like free will in this body in this lifetime now. And the chart gives us a sort of map to work with. Your birth chart gives you a map and guideposts to say this is one of your strengths, this is one of your weaknesses. This is a positive expression of this placement, and this is a negative expression of this placement. Now, here's the thing. If you're new to my podcast, if you're new to this world of what I teach here, then you might not know that you're not actually that sun sign when you were born. And you might not realize that when you're born, it was said that you were a Taurus sun, you actually look in the sky and it's in Aries. Because the current zodiac used by Western astrology is called the tropical zodiac, and it was established 2,000 years ago. when it was accurate, when you could look in the sky and see the sun in Aries, and that's where it was in the constellation with your naked eye. But that calculation did not factor in the tilt of the Earth, which creates the precession of the equinoxes, meaning that every 72 years, where the sun was once in Aries, it now moves a degree back. So at this point, that tropical zodiac that Western astrology uses and all the sun sign stuff and all the modern apps and everything, that is 23 degrees off because of the precession of the equinoxes, the tilt of the Earth, and this will continue to move every 72 years 1 degree. And it's important to really know what you're looking at when you're following astrology, because if you're following astrology like the GPS that it can be to help us guide us in a direction, it's very important that that GPS is accurate, right? It's like if we were using the Google Maps on the phone and it said that you were in Portland when you're actually in Cleveland, it's not going to help you very much. It's going to direct you in the wrong direction over and over again. So that's what I found was happening for myself when I was following Western astrology and had different placements. The sun was the same, so that's similar, but the other things were different and inaccurate to the actual astronomy of what was happening when I was born. So inaccurate to the truth of reality, and based on something that would have been true 2,000 years ago, had there not been a tilt of the Earth that was not calculated back then in the tropical zodiac. But Vedic astrology did calculate that tilt of the Earth, and there's different theories about why, but if you're not familiar with ancient Indian history, there's a lot of very important discoveries around mathematics and even surgery and different sciences from ancient India that we're still using to this day, like the concept of the number 0 that came from ancient India. And these calculations of astronomy, a lot of them potentially came from India. There's some debate about that, of course. Whether it did or not, what we do know for sure is that ancient Vedic astrology, which is known as Jyotish, did factor in the tilt of the Earth. So over the last several centuries, it has been accurate, it has remained accurate. Just like astronomy is always evolving and adapting because of that tilt of the Earth. So all the way back 2,000 plus years, 3,000 years ago, when Vedic astrology was established as a path of study, which potentially is much further back, again, depending on who you ask, but they were factoring that in, so the calculations have remained accurate. Just like if you look up in the sky with your own eyes, you'll see these movements of the planets in the signs that they say that they're in. And that's very important because a lot of these things were helped to base on rituals and plan major events and time ceremonies and work with the seasons. So it's very important that those calculations were accurate, which is of course true for other cultures too, but ancient India did have that part right. And you can test it for yourself. Like right now as I'm recording this, Western astrology websites will tell you that Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius. You can look with your own eyes at night if you got a view of the stars. That's great. Or if you have a telescope or a stargazing app like Night Sky is one I recommend. You can get a free version. Just look for yourself. Look where it says Saturn is. In the astronomy right now, it's in Capricorn as I'm recording this. So that is showing you how Western astrology, the tropical zodiac, is using inaccurate calculations. That is the second biggest mistake I see people making, is following the tropical zodiac, which I think is very effective as a seasonal system because it's really based on the seasons and the change of the seasons and the equinoxes and the solstices. And in that sense, it is true. There are like seasonal types of people. There's like a spring type of person. And if I were to make one change in the world of astrology in my lifetime, is hopefully to move away from this idea of saying it's Aries season in Western horoscopes and Western astrology, and instead say it's the spring season and your spring type, because that is more accurate to what it is based on. So that's another topic, but that's another big mistake I see people making, and it'd be pretty cool to see that change in our lifetime. And this form of astrology, of course, is called Vedic astrology, that uses what's called the sidereal zodiac, which is based on more astronomically true interpretations. And as I was kind of gathering my thoughts for this episode and expounding on this idea more, I looked at some of the major influences of Western astrology versus Vedic astrology on a society, on a culture. Because one of the big reasons I switched in over 10 years ago now, I guess, to Vedic astrology when I found my astrologer and started working with him. And I was following my Western astrology, looking at the horoscopes, looking at the websites, getting readings. And I was in depression. I was struggling a lot. My life was in a pretty dark, heavy place. And I really wanted to find some sort of direction out of that. Yoga and meditation were the first things that really helped me move out of that, which also have their roots in the same Vedic teachings as Vedic astrology, the source text of the Vedas, written around 1700s BCE. And then I found this teacher who said, "Oh, I teach this form of astrology." And I kept hearing all these people giving these rave reviews about him who had amazing experiences. So I finally scheduled a reading with him myself, and it was very helpful. So from this state of feeling depressed, lost, anxious, having health issues, I had digestive issues for a long time. I grew up never knowing my father, no father, in poverty, and had a lot of health issues early on, to starting to find this different way of Vedic astrology. And my reading, he validated all that experience. Like, oh, I can see, loss of father here, disconnection from the family can happen here, this placement there, teeth issues. I had a lot of teeth issues as well. That's all in my chart. And he didn't know me well enough to know any of that at that point, but he brought it out in the reading. And it was very validating and affirming and clarifying. And also I was resistant to it. It's like, no, but I've been reading this for years now. I know that this is my stuff. And the more I was like kind of attached to that, the more I was struggling in life. So I was open to the possibility that maybe there was something out of alignment in that path, and to be open to finding this other approach. And going from, for example, like a Libra rising to a Virgo rising is a pretty big shift of perspective of what is like my sort of default nature. And as I started to reflect, like, okay, what did I do before I knew anything about astrology? Who was I? Like, what was my essence as a child? And the Virgo stuff is there. I was very shy, very organized, very detailed. I loved making, before I knew anything about spreadsheets, I was making paper spreadsheets. I was like categorizing the movies I saw, the shows I watched. Like, what kind of kid does that? And a Virgo kid, not a Libra kid, right? So that's what I was doing, and that's how I was spending my free time and my own expression without anybody's external influence. That's where I was drawn to. I didn't learn about spreadsheets till much later, and then my whole life improved dramatically once I actually started utilizing those, like managing my finances and my time and energy. Not for everybody. That's not everybody's path. I'm not saying that's the right way. I'm saying that was for me very much in alignment, and I was no longer like living out of alignment. So I looked for other examples of this in society, and not just in myself, of like, where else in society can we see this example of like, if people are following Western astrology, is it leading them astray? Is it leading them into more problems, disconnection, distress, pain points? Or if they're following Vedic astrology, is it leading them to more success and prosperity and positive outcomes? And I'm going to talk about general society things. Now, there's, of course, many other factors in this. But for example, in the Western society of the United States, where I was born and live, that Western astrology is the standard. You look up any horoscope in any newspaper or whatever, or website, that's what you see. Any major app, it's all Western astrology, no questions asked. That's the astrology. So it really took me a lot of work to dig up this Vedic stuff and find this Vedic stuff and create the first podcast on it, because it didn't exist, because nobody was talking about it. So that's what led me here. But when you look at the society, and just like I was following Western astrology, what do we see? Well, some examples in the 4 major areas of life: health, wealth, relationships, and purpose. 40% of deaths are from preventable diet and lifestyle causes. Of course, the number one cause of death in the US is heart disease, and that is true throughout the world now because of the westernization of the world and things like fast food chains going global. 40% preventable. Lifestyle, habits, health, diet, nutrition related. The average person in the US has how much debt? How much would you guess? Last I saw this number, whenever I last saw this, I thought it was around like 30,000, maybe 40,000. But in the last couple of years, it's now 96,371 is the average debt per person in the US. The divorce rate, of course, is a stat that's thrown around a lot. Everybody kind of knows that now, almost like a joke. It's 50%. 1 in 2 marriages will end in divorce. That goes higher for second and third and fourth marriages, of course. And then work satisfaction. How many people are actually passionate about their work and their career path? That's, what would you guess? That's 20%. So 20%. So basically 1 out of 5 people are passionate about their work in the US. And you compare that to India, a society that has lived by Vedic astrology, and they created it. And many people born in India that I know personally have a family astrologer. They have somebody that from their birth said, okay, you're going to get married this time, you'll marry this kind of person, this kind of career, and all of it plays out and comes true. And I'll just tell you right now, that is not my personal strength as an astrologer and predicting like every aspect of your future. But there are people who do that. And that is often the case in family astrologers in India. And they'll clarify like strengths and weaknesses and things that will likely happen in your life. I tend to focus more on your choice and what you choose, how you choose to respond to those energies. So that being said, there is a strong influence of somebody saying like, this is what's going to happen. And then you kind of play it out in India. So you can discredit it in that way if you wanted to. But these numbers are dramatic. So instead of 40% of deaths from preventable diet and lifestyle causes, it's 0.18 in India. And that is increasing a lot now because of all the Western influence. The average debt per person, of course, they have a weaker economy, but it's way lower than the conversion rate would imply from the US to the rupee, to the dollar to the rupee. It's $1,741. $1,741 average debt per person in India. The divorce rate, if you've never heard this stat before, it might be a little shocking, but instead of 50%, which you might think is average across the globe, in India it's 1%, less than 1% actually. And then instead of 20% of people who are passionate about their work, in India it's 72% are passionate about their work. So 7 out of 10 people. And they're living in their dharma. Dharma is imbued in everything in India, for better or worse. I know there's all sorts of political things people could get into about this, but dharma is a huge part of aligning with what is your life purpose. What are you here to do? How can you serve in your unique way? And the majority of people are doing that and finding fulfillment in it. So, of course, lots of factors in this. I'm not going to go into all that, but those are the rough, general, broad stats about across the country from an influence of following Western astrology, which is inaccurate and, in my opinion, leading people astray because they're essentially following a GPS that's broken, versus India, which of course has all its own problems and limits, and it's not a perfect country. It's a very old country. It's a lot of old infrastructure and all that, but it has all these other benefits: low debt per person, low divorce rate, high job satisfaction and passion in their career, and lower deaths from preventable diseases. From a culture who is consistently following this guidance of a GPS that is true. It's reality. It's astronomy. It's right there for us to see with our own eyes. And that's where all the predictions and everything has come from, observing what you can actually see with your own eyes, not what is sort of based on an old system that has moved. So how do you start applying all this to your life? How do you integrate this? Well, this starts with, I think, 3 things. Number 1 is decoding your birth chart so that you can actually see the astronomical placements and say, okay, my sun is in Pisces and this is what that means. And then the second thing is discovering the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities in all of those placements. So Sun in Pisces has its own unique strengths and weaknesses. Strong imagination, sometimes a little too scattered, right? And how do you work with that? How do you find the opportunity in that, of what you can do to strengthen that and to bring out more of the strengths to reduce the weaknesses and the negative effects? You can do that with every placement in your chart, and there are many. Every planet has a place in your chart, and then every planet rules over a house in your chart. So there's a lot of influence in a lot of areas that you can influence and directly influence it in yourself. And then finally is getting some one-to-one support from an experienced teacher so that you can save yourself years of confusion and overwhelm and trying to figure it out on your own. Because yes, it is complicated. It would be easier to just say, you're a sun sign, that's it. You're just a Gemini, that's all you are, and be done with it. And then you can just read your Gemini horoscope and compare yourself to other people and compatibility based on that. How is that working, right? What kind of results do you see from that? It's like there's so many memes now of like people using astrology to decide on their partner, and there's just like this restless kind of energy of constantly looking like, what about this? What about that? And you're basing it on a fallacy. To be blunt, it's like it's not where your sun was when you were born. It's not an expression of your authority, your leadership ability, your creativity, which the sun represents. You're basing it off a broken GPS. And if you use it based on the seasons, that works. That works, and that's why Western astrology can be accurate. And it is accurate oftentimes because if you look at it as a system of seasons in itself, it works. But when you actually talk about signs and planets and houses and placements and all that, would you rather use astronomy, or would you rather use some calculation from 2,000 years ago that is no longer true? So this is why I created the Vedic Astrology 101 course that's coming up next week from when I'm recording this. I don't do this class very often, but when I do, it's a pretty special event, and we have an amazing group of people who join us from around the world. It's a lot of fun. The whole point is to help you decode your birth chart so you can improve these 4 major areas of your life: health, wealth, relationships, and purpose. And that ripples out to everything else, to, of course, your income and your career satisfaction and the health of your relationships and your vitality and your creativity and getting good sleep and feeling energized and focused and like you're just in alignment. And it starts with those 4 major areas of life, going all the way back to the old ancient texts. They talk about these 4 major aims of life. And when you focus on those and find fulfillment in those, everything else just a lot smoother and works a lot better. So that's where I focus on in this 101 course. So you get your birth chart at quietmindastrology.com, and then you look at it and you're like, what is this? It's like getting a foreign language or some sort of glyphs from ancient Egypt or something. And in a sense, it is almost like that. It's from ancient India, though, and you don't really know what it means, and it takes a while to really figure that out. And you can just go like I did and try to find old books. And back when I was learning, there was no YouTube stuff. There was no Google stuff. It was like just old archaic books. And unfortunately, I found my teacher, and that made it a lot easier and saved me a lot of time. So that's why I emphasize the importance of mentorship and learning this stuff. If you want to learn this on your own, you can. And there are more resources now. That's why I created this podcast. And now there are other Vedic astrology podcasts out there. And there's other resources more than ever. So it is easier to learn. And it's still like trying to be your own doctor and diagnose yourself when you don't have the full picture and you don't have the perspective of seeing hundreds and hundreds of clients over the years to know like, oh, okay, this is how that plays out. This is this pattern playing out. Here's what you can do. Here's what you want to avoid. Those kind of things just come from experience and working with a teacher or mentor in some way. So I do offer a mentorship program that will be coming up next month, but this is a great starting point. If you haven't done this course with me before, this is the course where I go into all of the essentials of planets, signs, houses, and Nakshatras, these smaller divisions of the sky that are unique to Vedic astrology and really, really cool. They get you very specific and detailed about things. But the signs, planets, houses, those are the foundations. We'll go into that a lot. You're going to basically go through your chart and write down every placement you have, what it means, what you can do with it, and I'll work with you one-on-one on the live workshop if you can be there. If you can't be there, you get a replay within 24 hours. You can watch it. You get lifetime access. And when I do this again in the future, you get access to that too. So we have a lot of people who come through every time I offer this course because it's so important to know the foundation and the fundamentals. No matter how much you learn in the future going forward, these foundational fundamentals are the core of everything else. And this is the core of the mentorship program that I offer, the certification in Vedic astrology. So that's coming up later. But right now, this week, while this is open for enrollment, there is a special discount, normally $247. You can join now for $97 at quietmindastrology.com/101. The number is 101. quietmindastrology.com/101 to join the Vedic Astrology 101 live workshop. We'll meet on Zoom for about 2 hours. I always stay longer. If you have questions, we'll probably be there about 3 hours. But plan for 2 hours. We'll cover the main stuff. There's a workbook you download. You can print it out if you want or just write your own way, but you'll want some way to write and take notes, because we're going to go through every single placement in your chart and help you understand what it means. I'll talk a little bit about the history of Vedic astrology, why it's so effective, but that was a lot of what this episode of the podcast is for, so I can focus on the actual content of your birth chart, helping you analyze it and understand it and decode it, because it is quite mysterious and mystifying and complicated at first, but it is easy to figure out once you know what to look for. And once you have some experience and practice of doing it, it'll make everything I teach here on the weekly horoscopes make so much more sense and be so much more specific and applicable to you. And that's why I say, you can't just take these general broad horoscopes and think that everything will apply to you. You have your own unique expression meeting these transits that are happening in the universe, that there is a sort of relationship there. So you really need to know yourself first before you're just reacting to what's happening externally. So meeting the internal and the external is very important. So that's what you learn in this workshop, and then much, much more inside the mentorship and how to actually do this with other people and understand yourself and understand others and actually be able to go much deeper into the depths of astrology, because there's a lot. And it's a lifelong study. And even in the old text, they say sometimes it takes 9 lifetimes to master astrology. So if you're here listening this podcast, you've probably encountered it in a past lifetime, is the idea. Again, that's something I don't know. I can't prove it, but I can certainly tell you that with these studies and my own growth, my own personal growth in my life, overcoming depression and feeling in the best health of my life and creating a career only doing work I love, making a great living and living in a beautiful home, exactly where I want to be, having a beautiful, harmonious relationship. All these benefits have come through living in alignment with my Vedic astrology chart, which is really just living in alignment with my intuition and myself and feeling it's validated and clarified of like, okay, this is certainly true. I can see it. I see it in my history. I see it in the history of other people's charts. And it makes it so much clarifying of like what to focus on, what direction to go. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? All those questions of like existential crisis become so much clearer and so much more direct. So if that sounds helpful to you, I would hope it does. You can check out quietmindastrology.com/101, and we'll go into all that stuff at the workshop. And that's all I wanted to share for today. So those are some of the biggest mistakes I see people making, is thinking you're just your sun sign, following inaccurate calculations that are not true to astronomy, and then just trying to do it all on your own and not having some sort of external support from somebody who can help you avoid a lot of the mistakes and confusion and overwhelm. So that's what I'm here to offer. And again, quietmindastrology.com/101 is where you can get all the details and sign up right now. This week, the enrollment's just $97. Then it goes up to $247 after that. And that's all for today. So look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology Podcast.